There are three types of ways people use to convince you of their points of view, of their ideas, to convince you or manipulate you, whichever their intention is. And understanding these three types will help you figure which approach is being used on you and how you should react to it. Because regardless of how truthful the idea is being pushed on you, you still have to put some thought before accepting it. And you shouldn't be ready available for quick changes of mind. So the three types of persuasion are ethos, pathos, and logos. Trust, feel, and think. The ethos approach occurs when people try to convince you of an idea by establishing trust in their person, usually by presenting their credentials along with the idea they want to communicate. If a doctor diagnosed you with a certain type of illness, you would believe them not because you also know medicine, but because they are qualified to diagnose your condition and you trust them. But there are many cases of ethos where people try to convince you of false credentials in order to manipulate you or maybe even steal your money. Think of online financial success gurus who claim to have made millions from online businesses, yet want to share their secrets with you so that you also become successful. So whenever people use this approach on you, you need to establish if their credentials are true and also if they are sincere in their intentions towards you. And the two ways I check for credentials are training and earnings. Training means I have been educated and most importantly tested in order to become qualified. Earnings mean, did the person I'm listening to make money from the skills and expertise they claim to have, and can they prove these earnings? If they cannot prove their training or earnings, then they have failed to prove their credentials and their ethos approach will not work on me. The Pathos approach applies when people try to convince you of something by invoking an emotional response from you, like fear, sympathy, anger, sadness, etc. Now, people trying to persuade you by triggering your emotions does not always mean the idea must not be true and that their intentions are insincere. However, it is good to learn to spot this approach and, as we discussed in the previous class, to distance yourself emotionally from their appeal. Do not allow them to trigger your emotions and prevent them from circumventing your brain and thereby immediately win you over to their side. And this is always my go-to reaction when someone tries to appeal to my emotions. I'll be like, okay, I get what you're trying to do. I understand where you're coming from, but I still need to go and establish if what you're saying is actually true. I will take your argument through the critical process described earlier. I will do my own review where I compare your argument to opposing arguments and evaluate the evidence each author's presented and their credentials before reaching a decision on who I should believe. So the key reaction here is to train yourself not to respond emotionally. So if you ever attend a rally or a speaker event where the eloquent orator is delivering a highly emotional speech with energy and passion and the attendees are like, oh, this is the best speech I've ever heard, you'd be like, no, this doesn't work on me. But if I'm interested enough, when I go home, I'm going to research everything they said. The last approach is logos. This is when people try to persuade you using structured arguments, reference to studies, and statistical evidence. And this is my go-to approach. I always try to reason with people, and my biggest frustration using this approach is when I apply it to people who are not intellectually equipped to appreciate the power of arguments and of evidence. So, in order to react properly to this approach, we need to understand the structure of arguments and what constitutes evidence, so that whenever someone argues logic with us, we are equipped to understand their argument, evaluate their evidence, and reach a decision on whether to believe them or reject their claim.